I didn't drop a bomb on Paris. I asked Poland to surrender 5 times before Warsaw. I gave Britain every chance for peace. That's what they said. The dictators, the mass murderers, the men who plunged the world into darkness and claimed they were the victims. And you know what? Millions believed them, at the time anyway. So here's what we're doing today. We're putting their words on trial. Real speeches, real claims, real consequences. We're dragging Hitler, Stalin, Chamberlain, and Mao into the fact-check courtroom and seeing if anything they said holds up under scrutiny. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. My name's Oliver, minimum wage employee Oliver, and I've been chosen or forced to participate in one of corporate's finest remaining fact-check programs. Lucky me, the setup's simple. We take a speech they gave. We check if their claims were truth or just manipulative garbage that got millions killed. Then they go through one of 2 doors. Green means you were naive but not evil. Red means, well, you're getting what you deserve. Let's see who's hiding something they probably shouldn't have said. Time to find out. Here's what we're going to cover. Hitler's fake Polish invasion, Stalin's constitution that guaranteed rights while executing hundreds of thousands, Chamberlain's catastrophic handshake, and Mao's famine that killed more people than World War I. Stay until the end because that last one is the death toll nobody wants to believe. Alright, let him in. Welcome, Adolf. Take a seat. So you've made quite the bold claims, haven't you? We've got your 1939 Reichstag speech where you said, "This war was forced upon us." And back in 1939, when you started the whole thing, you also claimed last night Polish regular soldiers fired on our own territory. Since dawn today, we are returning fire. Yeah, we're going to fact-check that. All of it. The year is 1940. You're giving your annual Reichstag speech, addressing the nation about current affairs. This one was huge. You just crushed France and you were offering what you called a final appeal to reason. Your peace offer speech. Thanks to modern AI translation, we can finally hear what you actually said that day in English. Time to break it down line by line. First sentence, Adolf. I have summoned you to this meeting in the midst of our tremendous struggle for the freedom and the future of the German nation. Freedom and future of the German nation. Hold on, that's not accurate at all. In 1940, Germany was fighting for its freedom because it had already thrown that freedom away by starting wars with every European nation within reach. By this point, your Germany had invaded Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France. Not to mention you'd already annexed Austria and Czechoslovakia. The idea that Germany was in some heroic struggle for freedom is a joke. It's justification for aggression, nothing more. Next claim. The program of the National Socialist Movement was simply an effort to effect revision of the Treaty of Versailles and, so far as possible, this was to be brought about by peaceful means. Peaceful means. You keep using that phrase. I don't think it means what you think it means. The violations stack up fast. You rearmed Germany in 1939. Strike 1. You remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936. Strike 2. You annexed Austria in 1938. Strike 3. You seized Czechoslovakia in 1939. That's more than 3 strikes, Adolf. You're out. None of those were peaceful. 0. You violated the Treaty of Versailles repeatedly and violently before the war even officially started. But then you say, the conditions imposed at Versailles were intolerable. Okay, you're actually right about that one. A lot of Germans felt that way. After World War I, the treaty hit Germany hard. They lost territory, colonies were forced to accept full blame for the war, and the reparations bill was massive. The country went through hyperinflation, unemployment, famine, death. It genuinely felt intolerable to ordinary people. But here's the thing, Adolf. That doesn't justify what you did. Because while the treaty was deeply unpopular, it didn't force Germany into dictatorship or another war. Germany's reparations had already been reduced. The Dawes Plan in 1924, the Young Plan in 1929, and they were cancelled entirely in 1932 at the Lausanne Conference. The economy was recovering. By 1940, when you gave the speech, you'd already rearmed, remilitarized, annexed multiple countries, and expanded your territory massively. I'd almost say you were better off than when you started, thanks to all that free expansion. Bringing up this old wound that has nothing to do with the current situation is a transparent, lazy justification for continuing the war. You're selling a victim narrative to people who should know better. Not looking great for you, Adolf. But the fake victimhood is just the appetizer. Because what Hitler did to manufacture his excuse for war, that's where this gets genuinely disturbing. Time to rapid-fire some more claims just to be sure. In this case, we once more showed unprecedented and truly superhuman self-control. You're referring to Poland's alleged provocations that supposedly forced Nazi Germany to invade. But what actually happened tells a different story. How do you think Hitler convinced an entire nation to attack their neighbors? He needed probable cause, a justification. On August 31 St. 1939, the day before the invasion, Germany fabricated the Gleiwitz incident. This was a false flag attack staged by German SS troops dressed as Polish soldiers. They stormed a German radio station, broadcast anti-German messages in Polish, and claimed Poland had invaded Germany. It was fake, completely manufactured. Germany didn't show self-control. You exerted control over the narrative. And if that wasn't proof enough, we also have the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, where Germany and the Soviet Union secretly partitioned Poland and other countries a week before the war even started. You and Stalin had already divided up the map before a single shot was fired. Self-control, right? Next claim. Last year this war was thrust upon Germany against my wish and desire. Is this guy serious? Not even going to comment on that one. Moving on. We possess the two most vital raw materials, coal and iron, in what I may today term unlimited quantities. Unlimited quantities. By 1940, Germany faced chronic shortages of both. You relied on imports of iron ore from Sweden and fuel from the Soviet Union until you betrayed them in 1941. Unlimited? Not even close. German and Russian relations have been finally established. True. But the next year you broke that pact and invaded the Soviet Union. So much for finality. And one more just for fun. In this hour, I feel it to be my duty to appeal once more to reason and common sense in Great Britain. Translation. Please let's settle for peace, Mr. Churchill. Please. You were continuously begging for peace with England. And yet again in this Reichstag speech you're making desperate appeals to reason. But behind the scenes, 3 days earlier, you'd already approved Operation Sea Lion, the invasion plan for Britain. And that appeal to reason. It was more of an ultimatum for surrender than anything else. Sorry, case number 23523, but it seems you're falling deep into red door territory. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave my office. Through the red door. Goodbye, Adolf. Alright, bring the next one in. You know what's worse than getting fact-checked by us? Getting shot by a tank. And then getting fact-checked. This video is sponsored by War Thunder, a free-to-play military combat game with insanely detailed tanks, planes, and ships from across history. We're talking hundreds of vehicles, realistic physics, and battles that will absolutely humble you if you're not paying attention. The game is available on consoles, PC, Mac, and recently even on your phone, which is honestly crazy. Join a community of over 1 million players by clicking the links in the description or pinned comment to play the game on your favorite device. And for new and returning PC players, there are a ton of bonuses on screen right now that will give you a massive head start. Now back to the show. Mr. Joseph, take a seat. Here's how this works. We check a speech of yours. Unfortunately, we don't have surviving audio, so a transcript will have to do. And depending on the outcome, you either go through the green door or the red door. What does each door mean? Well, don't worry, nothing to. Wait, hold on. Oh shoot, I forgot to send Hitler off. Muffled German shouting from the other room. Oh, don't mind that. Just sending him off. I'm doing what corporate wants. Don't look at me. Anyway, let's see if you also end up at the red door, Joseph. For you, we picked a pre-war speech. Specifically, the speech you gave in 1936 when your famous Stalin Constitution was officially legislated. It was the second official constitution of the USSR, and it was supposedly the most democratic and progressive on earth. Though when you read between the fine lines, you notice it simply gave you, Joseph, total authoritarian control. I wonder if that has anything to do with the Great Purge you started the following year. You know, mass executions, gulag expansion, total silencing of opposition. I'm getting ahead of myself. Time to pick apart your speech. No surviving audio means I'll be doing the narration. Don't worry, I practiced for this moment. Soviet Oliver time. The new Soviet constitution guarantees complete equality of rights for all citizens. Complete equality. The bread and butter of communism. Let's see how that went. In the same year, entire ethnic groups, Poles, Koreans, Finns, Germans, who were still Russian citizens, were being deported or placed under NKVD surveillance. The 1937 Polish operation alone killed over 100,000 people. At least equalize it and kill everyone at that point, right? Freedom of speech and of the press is fully secured for the working people. Yes, the Soviet definition of freedom. Say whatever you want. Once, every newspaper, radio station, and publishing house was state-controlled under Glavlit. Criticize the party? You don't get a news piece. You get a neck shot. From 1937 to 1938, hundreds of writers and editors were executed or sent to the Gulag, where they were, I guess, free to die. Freedom of conscience is guaranteed. The church is separated from the state. Translation: you're free to believe and attend church if you can find one. Over 40,000 churches were closed. Priests were arrested, shot, or sent to Siberia. By 1939, there were maybe a few hundred functioning churches left in the entire USSR. Worship was replaced by weekly confessions to the party. Elections will be universal, equal, and secret. Not even going to get into that one. I think everyone knows that was complete garbage. Exploitation of man by man has been abolished. True. Now it's the state exploiting everyone. The Gulag system turned millions into slave laborers. From logging in the Arctic to digging canals by hand, over 1.5 million people died doing non-exploitative socialist labor. The Soviet Union has eliminated unemployment forever. Yeah, because not working was illegal. Parasite laws made unemployment a crime, punishable by prison or exile. The internal passport system tied workers to factories. You didn't pick a job. The job picked you. And if you refused, there's always employment waiting in Kolyma. The people trust their government completely. Of course they did. Because not trusting it got you killed. The USSR ran on fear, not faith. Informant networks were everywhere. Neighbors, co-workers, even children reporting on their parents. Trust meant keeping quiet and hoping your name didn't end up on a list. And here's my favorite one, Joseph. This constitution is the victory of socialism. Yeah, sure, Joe. The victory of socialism. Written in ink, signed in blood. From 1937 to 1938, the NKVD, the Russian secret police, unleashed what's now called the Great Terror. Mass arrests, show trials, and executions on an industrial scale. NKVD Order 00447 gave regional quotas. Arrest and execute 72,950 people in Moscow, 65,000 in Ukraine. Almost like a grocery list for genocide. And if they didn't meet the quota, they risked being on the next batch ready to be purged. Official Soviet archives list 681,692 people executed in those 2 years. That's roughly 1,000 people shot every single day. All while the victory of socialism was supposedly in full swing. The only thing socialism truly won that year was the title of biggest self-inflicted massacre of the 20th century. Until Mao beat your record. Don't worry, he's up later. And what Mao did, it makes Stalin's death toll look almost modest by comparison. Joseph, my friend, I thought Hitler was bad. But you? Come on, man. I'm not a commie or anything, but your actions might have just killed the entire socialism movement for generations to come. Could have been a nice thing somewhere, Red door, please. No glory for you, Mr. Stalin. Call up case number 23525. Mr. Chamberlain. Welcome. Now, you weren't much of a genocidal guy. But it can be argued, especially by modern historians, that your actions allowed Hitler to gather power and even enabled World War II to happen. So we've gathered the speeches you gave before you quote-unquote saved the world, and after, to see if you were evil or just a silly little goose. Eyes on the television, please. Audio clip plays. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And so you went. On the plane to Munich. You met with Herr Hitler, allowed him to annex more territory, and came back home to London triumphantly the next day, where you said, "Eyes on the television, please." I want to say that the settlement of the Czechoslovak problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace. Well, we definitely didn't forget this moment. Hindsight is 2020, which I didn't know before, means that even when you think you have perfect vision, you can still miss something important in the past. And oh boy, Neville, did you have bad vision. In this speech, you mentioned the settlement of the Czechoslovak problem. That phrase sounds way more polite than the reality deserved. What you called a settlement was the Munich Agreement. September 30th 1938. You, Hitler, Mussolini, and Daladier, the Prime Minister of France, all sat down in Munich to decide what to do about the Sudetenland, a part of Czechoslovakia where a few million ethnic Germans lived. Hitler claimed they were being mistreated and demanded the territory back since Germany lost it after World War I. Instead of standing up to him, you and the others just handed it over. You didn't even let the Czechoslovaks into the room while their country was being carved up. Everyone called it a peace deal. But in reality, Adolf made everyone in the room, well, maybe aside from Mussolini because they were pen pals, look like absolute fools. Did you really think Adolf wanted the Sudetenland because of sentimental land values? Not because, coincidentally, the Sudetenland had Czechoslovakia's main fortifications, armament industries, and mountain defenses? Taking it meant the country would be militarily crippled. No surprise, 6 months later Hitler took the rest of the country. Because why not? We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again. By again, you meant you didn't want a second world war. You famously once said, "I have seen the Führer, and I believe he is a man who can be relied upon when he has given his word." I'm sorry, Neville, but this isn't a steak dinner reservation you're looking over. We're talking about another world war here. You mentioned it yourself just now that you never want one again. But you failed. And not just a little bit. Hitler broke every agreement handed to him. And every leader in Europe, with you at the helm, let him get away with it until it was too late. Within 6 years, about 85 million people were dead. Europe was in ruins. But the consequences of your actions don't stop there. What followed was the Cold War. The power vacuum in Europe allowed the USSR to become one of the main global players, and the world was plagued by ideological wars for decades. Tens of millions more died. To this day, your actions, or rather your lack of action, still have countries fighting each other. Think about the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. The Holocaust, the direct result of your failure to stop Hitler, became the moral justification for creating Israel in 1948, backed by, of course, Britain, which, to no one's surprise, caused massive suffering and anger for all parties involved. And no, it wasn't a secret that Adolf hated Jews. He'd been making claims about them for years before you met him. But you know what? I think somewhere inside you, you knew this appeasement policy wouldn't work. Why else did you manipulate the masses with your BBC propaganda reports, making it all look so much nicer than it actually was? I don't think you fully understand the severity of the situation. People blame you, Mr. Chamberlain, for World War II, for all the pain and suffering that came later. I'm not saying it's entirely justified. You didn't pull the trigger, after all. But you could have stopped it. Even God was disappointed in you, so he gave you bowel cancer and you died the first year into the war because of it. I guess in that regard, karma has been served. I don't think you're evil, Mr. Chamberlain. But my God, are you a naive bastard? Green door. Alarm blaring. Wait, what? That can't be right. I'm sorry, Neville. Seems corporate disagrees with my assessment. I wanted green, but they say red. I'm afraid it's the red door for you too. All right. Case number 23526. Mao Zedong. Chairman Mao Zedong. The stage is 1949. China has just emerged from decades of civil war and Japanese occupation. The communists won. The nationalists fled to Taiwan. The country is devastated. Industries destroyed. Farmlands ruined. Hundreds of millions living in poverty. When you took power, you declared, "The Chinese people have stood up." In the years that followed, you set out to transform China into a modern, industrialized nation that could rival the West. You looked at Britain, America, the Soviet Union, industrial giants and said, "Why can't we do that? Why can't we leap forward instead of crawling?" So in 1958, you launched the Great Leap Forward. The idea sounded simple. Turn China into an industrial powerhouse overnight. No waiting, no compromise, no problem. But there was a problem. You had no machines, no engineers, no real plan. Just slogans and fear. You famously told the nation in 1958, steel is the key. Without steel, we can't build socialism. So local officials panicked. Every town, every village was told to build their own backyard furnace to smelt metal and boost production numbers. People melted everything they owned. Pots, pans, farming tools, even door handles. Millions believed they were saving their country. Also because saying no to Mao wasn't an option. What they produced wasn't steel. It was slag, brittle, useless junk. But officials couldn't admit that. They faked the numbers, reporting record production. Mao smiled. The party applauded. And the lie became national truth. Meanwhile, the tools were gone. And no one had anything left to harvest with. At the same time, you created people's communes. Thousands of families merged into one unit. The communes took everything. The home, the animals, the food, everything. Farmers couldn't keep even a handful of grain. And when officials, trying to impress their superiors, lied about huge harvests, the government seized grain that didn't exist. What little food was left was locked up, guarded by soldiers. In some places, people were caught stealing a few kernels of corn and beaten to death. In others, entire families starved quietly because they'd been labeled lazy or counter-revolutionary. By 1959, people were boiling grass, eating bark, clay, even their own children. Now don't say you weren't told about it. Your own defense minister, Peng Dehuai, sent you a private letter begging you to stop, to face the truth. You called him a traitor, purged him, and warned everyone else what would happen if they spoke up. From that moment, silence ruled China. Between 1958 and 1962, somewhere between 30 and 45 million people died. That's more than World War I. I'll push you through the red door myself for that one. Bye. Alright, I'm clocking out. See you, boss. Waldo from the back. Heh. Goodbye, Oliver. Waldo and Oliver Crumbs. See you in the next video. And next time someone tells you dictators are just misunderstood, show them this video. Because every single one of them told you exactly who they were in their speeches. The question is whether anyone was listening.